You awakened. You felt the call. The spirit within you cried out for freedom, and you listened. You abandoned old masks, broke cycles, burned bridges that no longer led anywhere, and then you thought you would finally find peace. Finally, you would belong. But something strange happened. After so much freeing yourself, you found yourself more alone than ever. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you prefer to crawl through life?" But what if, even with wings open, the sky around us seems empty? What if, when you wake up, you realize that others are still asleep? What if the light you found makes you see that you are walking alone? Maybe no one told you that spiritual awakening isn't a glorious end. It's a solitary rebirth, a kind of silent pain that doesn't appear in books, a sacred emptiness that no one mentions in meditation courses. It's like waking up in a world where everyone still dreams, and not knowing how to get back. Do you feel it? Do you also look around and realize that no one understands you anymore? That talking has become tiring, that being with others makes you even more alone, as if your soul had changed frequency but no one had noticed? That's why many people start crawling again, even though they already have wings. Because flying alone can be scarier than living in prison. Because there is no map for those who wake up before their time. And spiritual loneliness hurts differently. It hurts because it's not just the absence of company. It is a lack of connection. It's realizing that the old bonds no longer hold. It's feeling that what once made sense now seems shallow, false, automatic. You started to see through the words, seeing the soul behind the eyes, listening to silences more than opinions. And all of this pushed you away. But what if this distancing isn't rejection? What if it is divine protection? What if loneliness is the cocoon before the new flight? Rumi said, "The soul has been painted with the colors of love, but you have forgotten how to see." Maybe your soul is seeing. Maybe that's what isolates you. And do you know the most curious thing? The more awake you become, the harder it is to explain what you feel. You begin to be silent, not out of fear, but out of wisdom, because you realize that words don't reach what your soul is screaming. It's like you've turned into silence. And in that silence, he realized how much he had screamed for attention his entire life. Now, all you want is peace. But peace, my love, comes at a high price. She asks for solitude. She calls for the breaking of everything that is superficial. It requires you to learn to support yourself. And that breaks your heart. Have you ever had the feeling of being more aware, more whole, more true, and at the same time, more disconnected from everything that was familiar? You are not broken. You are in transition. What no one tells you about spiritual awakening is that he does not come with applause. It comes with silence, with distancing, with nights where you wonder if you've gone crazy. But maybe, deep down, this solitude is just the sacred space where your soul is learning to hear itself, without interference. Perhaps it is in this place that your true essence is being revealed. And maybe you're not ready for that yet. Or maybe you've been ready for a long time, but I needed to hear this now. Before continuing, take a deep breath. Feel this pain. Don't run away from her, because she's the one who's going to open the next door. Maybe you've never put it into words, but you feel it. You feel like you're giving too much and receiving less and less. You feel like you speak from the heart, but the world responds with silence. You feel more present, but no one sees you anymore. There is a pain that does not bleed, but suffocates. An absence that has no name, but weighs heavily. It's like you're in a new world, but still stuck in the old one, walking between two spaces, what you were and what you are becoming. And no one around seems to understand. You try to explain, but they call you too sensitive. You share your wounds, and they offer you cliches. You seek depth, but find shallowness. And then he falls silent. Once again, this is the loneliness that nobody talks about. The loneliness of the awakened, of the sensitive, of those who feel too much and pretend less. But let me tell you something. You are not alone because you are weak. You are alone because you are true. And this scares those who still live with masks. Now tell me, do you feel this way too? Have you ever experienced this silence after waking up? Right here in the comments. I really do go it alone, because my soul has awakened. I want to know who walks with me on this invisible journey. And if this touched your heart in any way, leave your like right now. It's not just a button. It's a signal to the universe that you're ready to heal through truth. And if this message resonated with your soul, subscribe to the channel. This journey is just beginning, and even though it seems lonely, it will never be silent again. You thought that upon awakening, you would find peace, you would find connection, you would find souls like your own. But the truth is, what you found was silence, a strange silence, a silence that comes not from serenity, but from absence, an absence of understanding, of real presence, of someone who looks you in the eye and says, I understand, I see you, you read, you studied, you took courses, you cried during meditations, you felt the energy move through your body, you opened your chest, tore open your soul, and surrendered yourself to the invisible. But inside, there's still something that hurts, that tightens, an emptiness that no one explains, that no one recognizes, and that you don't have the courage to name out loud, because it would be like admitting that all your effort wasn't enough. But let me tell you something that almost no one has the courage to say. You can be spiritually awake and still deeply emotionally alone. This is the invisible problem, the one no one teaches in books, the pain no one shows on social media, amid candles, crystals, and pretty words. Why, even though you seek so much light, does it seem like no one sees you when you need it most? Why is it that the more you align with your essence, the more distant you feel from the people around you? Why does this emptiness still live inside, even after so many practices, retreats, prayers? The answer is brutal but liberating. Spiritual awakening does not cure human pain. It reveals. It reveals how far you've distanced yourself. It reveals how much your connections were based on need, on external validation. And when the soul begins to remember who it is, everything that was attachment disguised as love dissolves. And then there's you and the silence, you and the truth, you and the mirror that forces you to look without a filter. You may feel like you are becoming more and more aware, but more and more disconnected. Not disconnected from the world, but from the old versions of you that still try to survive in environments that no longer vibrate with your soul. Maybe that's why you've been quieter, more selective, more reclusive. Maybe that's why you feel like conversations have lost their meaning, that meetings have become too noisy, too superficial. It's not that you're too demanding. It's that you're finally learning to listen to the silence of your soul, and she is no longer satisfied with crumbs. She is not satisfied with absent presences, with rehearsed affection, with relationships that do not sustain her truth. This is the invisible problem. You're awake, but the world is still asleep, and trying to wake others up too early will only hurt you, because those who are still asleep do not understand those who have already woken up. Worse, he interprets your silence as arrogance, your depth as drama, your sensitivity as weakness, and then you start to doubt yourself. You start to wonder if you're going crazy, if you're wrong for feeling so much, for distancing yourself from everything, for not being able to fit in anymore. But what if the problem isn't you? What if what you feel is actually a symptom of your soul clearing out what no longer belongs? Nobody talks about it. Nobody shows this side of the path, the part where you feel like a stranger in your own life, where every step feels like a rupture, where each new awakening is also a small death. And even if you try to go back, you no longer fit into what you were. It no longer fits into shallow conversations, emotional games, or relationship dynamics where love is conditional on performance. You're tired of having to adapt to be accepted, tired of having to keep quiet to be loved, tired of having to pretend to be in less pain than you feel, just so you don't seem fragile. You are not fragile. You are honest. And that scares me, because most people would rather live in the stories you've made up about yourself than stare into the naked soul of someone who stopped lying. But even knowing that, it hurts. It hurts not to be seen. It hurts to realize that when you needed to be heard, you only heard advice. It hurts to know that even though he tried to heal, he was judged. It hurts to have been true in a world that rewards performance and not presence. That's why many come back. They go back to pretending, to fitting in, to accepting what no longer makes sense, because the loneliness of the true is cruel. But let me tell you something. This loneliness won't last forever. She's here because she's clearing out everything you no longer need to carry. It is a sacred period of collection, of polishing, It is in the void that his new voice begins to echo. It is in silence that your soul relearns to speak, and when she speaks, everything changes. But for that to happen, you need to go through this tunnel. You need to cross this shadow. You need to understand that the problem is not that no one understands you. It's just that you stopped betraying yourself to be understood. Now breathe. Let that truth settle in. And tell me one thing with all the honesty of your soul. Do you also feel like you are more aware, but more alone than ever? If this resonated with you, write just one sentence in the comments. I walked away because I found myself. Perhaps as you write this, you will realize that you are no longer so alone. Perhaps until now, you believed there was something wrong with you. That feeling, this loneliness, was a sign that you had failed on your spiritual journey. That this distance from others, this discomfort with the noise of the world, this inner silence that seems to scream, was just another unresolved emotional problem. But what if I told you that this isn't the end? It's the beginning. Awakening is not the end of pain. It is the beginning of awareness of it. Before, you felt pain and ran away. Now you feel, and you feel deeply. Because the awakened soul no longer anesthetizes. It opens wide. It shows without filters what the ego spent years trying to hide. You begin to realize that constant sadness, that emptiness in your chest, that feeling of abandonment that's been with you since childhood, were never just passing emotional states. They were symptoms of a soul trying to return home. Symptoms of an inner calling you tried to silence with distractions, with relationships, with external promises of happiness. You are not alone because you have failed spiritually. You are alone because you have awakened in a world where few are still awake. And this loneliness is not rejection. It is vibrational separation. It is your soul climbing a step, while others have not even noticed the ladder yet. What hurts is not waking up. What hurts is losing your illusions. It's realizing that many of your relationships were based on invisible agreements of pain. You offered care in exchange for belonging. You offered silence in exchange for acceptance. You diminished yourself to be chosen. And when the spirit awakens, all this comes to the surface. What was automatic is now questioned. What was comfortable becomes unbearable. And what once seemed like love turns out to be need. The spiritual root of your pain is not the absence of others. You are in the presence of an old you who is still trying to survive in places where your soul has already departed. It's this mismatch between what you feel and what you experience that hurts. It is this new consciousness clashing with old versions of yourself that still resist. Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you, but no one warns you that this light can isolate you from those who still live in the dark, because those who are still stuck in pain often reject those who have already begun to heal it, not out of malice, but because he doesn't know how to deal with someone who no longer accepts suffering as a form of bond." You started to change, and that's scary. It scares you, and it scares others, because there's a part of you that still wants to come back, that still wants to be embraced, welcomed, loved like before. But there is no place left, because the old you no longer exists, and the new you is still being born. This is the sacred ground of awakening, the space between the symbolic death of the ego and the birth of a new spiritual identity. It's not pretty, it's not fast, and it's definitely not comfortable. It's dirty, messy, lonely, but profoundly true. You start to notice patterns. You begin to notice that you have attracted the same pain, the same situations, the same rejections, just with different names. And then you understand, it wasn't the other person. It was you repeating yourself. It was your soul trying to show you, over and over again, where the wound was. And now, with your eyes open, you see, and there is no way to unsee it. The root of your pain is not now. It's the accumulation of old silences that you swallowed to survive. It is the memory of your soul, which still carries unfulfilled promises of love. It's the emotional trauma that was frozen in time, and that now comes to the surface with force. But look, this is a privilege. Feeling is a privilege. Seeing clearly is a blessing that hurts. But it is only with this conscious pain that true healing happens. You are in the middle of a crossing, and this crossing is not for everyone. It is for those who can bear to look within. It is for those who have the courage to sit before their own emptiness and listen to what it has to say. And do you know what the void says? That you no longer need to beg for love. that you no longer need to chase validation, that the presence you so seek in others is the presence you never gave to yourself. Perhaps for the first time, you are being invited to stay, staying with you, staying with the pain, sticking with the truth. And that's when everything starts to change, not outside, but inside, silently, deeply, irreversibly. Now tell me honestly, do you also feel that your soul no longer accepts what you once called love? If this part touched something in you, if it made sense in a way you can't even explain, write here in the comments. To wake up is to lose what was never real. Let's see how many souls are waking up together, even if in silence. You're going through a process that few understand. And it's not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're finally doing something true. You're stripping yourself bare. You're allowing your soul to speak louder than your ego. And this process, though sacred, doesn't come with flowers. It comes with silence. It comes with separations. It comes with departures you didn't choose, but that your soul has been silently begging for a long time. What no one told you is that awakening separates you before reconnecting you. Because awakening is not a magic pass that takes you straight to emotional paradise. It's a crossing, a bridge, and before giving you new bonds, he needs to break the old ones, those that were built on your pain, your need, your wounded version. That's why it feels like everything is falling apart. That's why people drift apart, why cycles end, why friendships grow cold. Not because you're worse, but because your vibration has changed. His soul began to say no, even when his mouth still wanted to say yes. And in that gap between what was and what will be, there is a place, a space of solitude that no one celebrates. This space is the womb of your new essence. It is where your soul is strengthened in silence. It's where you relearn how to be without needing to be for anyone. It's where you discover yourself whole, even in pieces. But the mind does not understand this. She wants answers. She wants belonging. She wants to understand why you feel so much, why you lost people who swore to stay, why everything seems more distant now. But the soul only wants truth. And the truth sometimes demands emptying. Maybe you're still trying to fit in where you no longer fit, trying to sustain bonds that no longer feed your essence, trying to pretend it hasn't changed, just so you don't lose. But losing is also sacred, because what goes away during awakening was never really yours. It was an attachment, a lesson, a mirror, but it was never a home. The key is to accept this. In understanding that you do not walk alone, you are being prepared, ready to walk with those who have also found their own light, and those who still live in the dark will be bothered by its brightness, will try to erase, minimize, distort, not because he hates you, but because he doesn't know how to love himself yet. What you feel now, this dense solitude, this profound silence, this discomfort of no longer belonging, is not punishment. It's transition. It is maturation of the soul. It's the gap between versions. And it is in this interval that you find something that no one can take away. Presence. The true presence. One that does not depend on applause, recognition, company. The one that is born when you learn to be with yourself. Whole. No escape. No mask. No emotional addiction. The key to healing is not finding someone to fill your void. It's about learning to inhabit this emptiness with dignity, in transforming the echo of loneliness into a song of freedom, in letting silence reveal what noise has always muffled. You thought you needed to be understood to feel loved, but now he begins to realize that he needs to love himself, even without being understood, because the soul no longer wants to be accepted for what it appears to be. She wants to be recognized for who she is, and that key that transforms pain into wisdom, is not in others. It's in you. It always has been. But to find it, you had to lose everything that distracted you, everything that filled halfway, everything you called loving, but was actually fear of being alone. The loneliness you feel today is the waiting room for your new life. It is the space where the old falls apart, and the new has not yet arrived. And in that space, it's easy to doubt, easy to want to go back, easy to believe that you made a mistake. But no, you are exactly where you are supposed to be, even if it looks dark, even if it seems empty, because the true light does not come to those who refuse to go through the night. Maybe you still feel lost, but this loss is the way. that's where you find yourself. Because finding yourself is not about going back to who you were. It is dying to what held you back and being born to what sets you free. And yes, it is a lonely process, but it won't always be like this. In due time, souls that vibrate like yours will appear. But first, space is needed. It takes truth. Presence is required. Now tell me, with an open soul, do you also feel like you've lost everything, and at the same time you're starting to find yourself? If this spoke to your heart, write in the comments. In silence, I reconnect with who I am. This may be your first shared truth, after so long of being silent. Maybe you're going through this right now. Maybe you're silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because you're tired of trying to explain what you feel to someone who has never listened with their soul. Maybe you're distancing yourself from the people you love, not out of pride, not out of coldness, but because the bond broke at the exact moment you stopped betraying yourself, just to maintain the other person's presence. And as much as it hurts, there was no more truth in that connection. You could no longer laugh at the same jokes, nor hold shallow conversations, nor pretend that certain behaviors didn't bother you. Before, you accepted emotional crumbs. You settled for little for anything that felt like love, even if it was control, even if it was need in disguise. Not today. Today you prefer solitude to self-abandonment. And that, even though it's hard, is waking up. You start to remember situations where you stayed when you already wanted to leave, of relationships in which he begged for presence, when he barely received respect, of moments when he held back his tears, when he stifled his truth just to avoid conflict. All of this now seems distant, almost strange, because something in you has changed, something inside has broken, and doesn't want to be glued back together. And this is the part that no one shows you, the silent transformation. That moment when you still love, but can no longer stay. Because love alone does not sustain a relationship, and if the bond requires you to deny your soul in order to function, then it's no longer a bond, it's an emotional prison. The before was lack, the now is sacred solitude. Before you had to be chosen to feel loved. Now you need to love yourself enough to no longer beg for other people's choices. This changes everything. It changes the way you relate, change what you tolerate. It even changes your idea of love. Maybe you are experiencing exactly this. You walked away from someone you still love, someone who, perhaps, still seeks you out, but with the same energy as before, with the same patterns, with the same fears. And every time that person appears, you feel your heart sway, but your soul doesn't allow you to return. This is the new you saying, I don't abandon myself anymore. It's your inner presence gaining strength. It's the end of the cycle of hurting yourself to keep those who don't really see you. Maybe you're going through a breakup, but not just any ending. A quiet end. No fighting. No long explanations. Just the collapse of a connection that no longer held the truth of your spirit. You notice the absence. I miss it, yes. But you realize that now, missing something isn't the same as needing it. And that is one of the greatest cures, to love and still choose to leave. Because you understand that love can also become sick when it is done at the expense of one's own truth. Before, you were content. Today, you question. Before you expected. Today, you choose. And in that choice, you lose yourself. But you also find yourself. Maybe you're looking around and seeing a void where there was once promise. But this void is fertile. It is in it that your new life will be planted. It is there that your soul can grow, without having to bend to fit in with anyone's affection. You still feel it, and you will continue to feel it. Because waking up is not about stopping feeling. It is about feeling everything, but with awareness. It's seeing the wounds and no longer running away from them. It is looking at the past with compassion, but without nostalgia. It's recognizing that each person who passed by showed you something, but not all of them are prepared to walk with you on the path that your soul now demands. You're not cold for walking away. You are not ungrateful for saying enough. You just understood that sometimes continuing is the real abandonment, and leaving, even with a broken heart, is an act of respect for your own essence. That's where you're at, between love and limits, between affection and consciousness, between the past and the possibility of the new. And it doesn't matter how much they judge you for it. You know what you carry in your chest, you know how much you held, you know how hard you tried. You know how much you fought to keep a bridge that only you supported standing. Now finally, you've let go. And that, as painful as it may seem, is healing. And healing is not always easy. Sometimes healing is crying silently after saying, "I can't do it anymore." Sometimes healing is feeling lost because you chose yourself. Sometimes healing is doubting your own strength, until it begins to manifest itself in actions that previously seemed impossible. You are not who you were, and you don't need to justify yourself for it. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone will follow. But this road was made for those who have the courage to listen to themselves. Now tell me, have you ever had to leave a place where there was still love, but there was no longer truth? If so, write here in the comments, "I chose the truth, even when it hurt." Maybe your sentence is the mirror that another soul needs to recognize itself now. You're not lost, even if it seems so. Even if everything around you insists on making you feel out of place. Even if the old paths no longer make sense, and the new ones haven't yet revealed themselves. You're not lost. You're being found again by your soul, and that changes everything. Because while the world tries to define you by what you've lost, your soul begins to remind you of who you are, and always have been. There comes a point in your journey when you tire of searching for meaning outside yourself. You tire of wanting others to understand. You tire of waiting for someone to tell you you're on the right path. Because deep down, you already know. You've always known. The silence you're experiencing now isn't a lack of direction. It's the necessary pause for your essence to once again speak louder than the noise of the world. You begin to realize that the answers don't lie in theories, nor in gurus, nor in the ready-made phrases that seem comforting but don't sustain. The answers lie in your body, in your silences, in the tears that flow without explanation. They lie in the shivers that come out of nowhere, in the nights when sleep doesn't come, in the intuitions you used to ignore. They lie within you. Rumi said, "Don't settle for stories of how things happen to others. Awaken your own legend." And maybe that's the turning point, when you stop trying to follow someone else's footsteps and start writing your own path, even if it's crooked, imperfect, lonely, because only then will it be true. You've spent your life adapting, trying to fit into the molds you've been given. Emotional, spiritual, relational molds. You pretended to be less intense, less sensitive, less intuitive. You learned to hide your soul to be accepted. And now, in the quietest moment of your existence, something inside you screams, "Enough." Enough pretending you don't feel it. Enough holding back an energy that wants to explode. Enough hiding the light for fear of disturbing those still living in the shadows. This is the turning point. Not that dramatic scene that the world applauds, but the invisible scene in which you, within your silence, decide to never abandon yourself again. You are not the pain. You are the one who survived it. You are not the loneliness. You are the one learning to inhabit your own company with dignity. You are not the trauma. You are the one who is redefining the pain that you were made to believe was your fault. You are the one who is breaking silent, ancestral, deep patterns. Patterns that say that to be loved you must be small, silent, adaptable. But you weren't born to crawl. You were born with wings. And yes, maybe they're injured. Maybe you've forgotten how to fly. Maybe you believed for too long that you weren't worthy of freedom. But now it's all coming back. Slowly, deeply. You're remembering. And when you remember, there's no longer any acceptance of what once held you hostage. You start saying no. And every no you say to what hurts you is a yes you say to your soul. It's a liberation. A silent break with everything that once held you back. And that's true freedom. Not the kind shouted from the rooftops, but the kind you feel in your chest when you take a deep breath and realize you no longer need to run from yourself. Life will no longer give you guarantees, but it will give you clues, small signs, and you will begin to see, you will begin to feel, you will begin to trust, because once the soul awakens, it never sleeps again. And even though there are still dark days, you carry light. And this light doesn't depend on anyone. It's not a reflection of another. It's yours. Your journey isn't about being understood. It's about becoming unmistakable. It's not about being accepted by everyone. It's about being whole for yourself. It's not about going back to being who you were. It's about giving birth to something new within yourself, even if it hurts, even if it takes time, even if no one sees it. You know it. You feel it. And that's what matters now. This silent certainty that begins to grow within you, that tells you, without words, you're coming back, coming home, coming back to yourself, coming back to the soul you've tried to hide for so long, afraid of being too much. But now, being too much is no longer a problem. It's a gift. Your sensitivity is a gift. Your depth is a gift. Your solitude now is a temple. And even if no one understands this place you're inhabiting, you know that, this time, you no longer need to leave yourself to be loved. Now tell me, with the sincerity that only silence can bring, are you also starting to remember who you were, before the world told you who you should be? If this part of the video spoke to your soul, write here in the comments, "I'm coming home." Perhaps this phrase will help another soul recognize that they are also on the path. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you recognized the truth that was spoken. Perhaps it was a word, a silence, an invisible mirror that reminded you of who you are inside. And if you felt all of this, it's because you're ready to take the next step. Loneliness is not a punishment. It is the secret path to your healing. She didn't come to punish you. She came to reveal you. And if this journey touched your soul, then subscribe to the channel now. Here, each video is a dive. Each word, a mirror. Each silence, a reunion. The journey is lonely until it becomes sacred. Leave your like, not for me, but for you. By recognizing that your pain has value, your healing has a place, and your soul has a voice. And now, watch the next video that appears on the screen. It was made for you, and maybe it contains exactly what you didn't know you needed to hear.